I'm Nomi. I'm an occupational therapist who works with SpecialEffect. So SpecialEffect, there we are. SpecialEffect is a charity that helps people who have disabilities find a way to access gaming generally. We also help with access to computer for more emergency access for communication aids. The charity started in 2007 by Mick, where the arrow is, and now we have a big group of us, and we've all sort of specialised into OTs who are doing the service delivery side of things. We have technicians and R&D side, as well as our amazing fundraising communication team. We're a charity that aren't really funded by the government, so it's all sort of funded via donations and things like that. So the team do really well for that. So a bit about why we're kind of needed, really. So Mick had worked as a teacher for years in special educational needs. And when he was working, he found like there was quite a good amount of accessibility and using technology in sort of communication and very basic skills, potentially like pressing a button to call for help, that kind of a thing. But they weren't really based on fun. It was all about sort of the need at the time, which is great, but you know, children in particular, play is an important part of how they learn and develop. So over the years, he started up this charity, and we're all focused on making gaming as easy as possible and as accessible as possible for people. So it started off sort of branching into the two main projects. Lone Library, which focuses on video games and accessing technology for leisure and creativity. And then the Stargaze project, which generally works with eye gaze technology. So for example, if someone has a traumatic injury, and in this picture, you have one of our service users, Rob, who had a spinal cord injury. So at the time of this photo, he wasn't really able to move anything below his shoulders. And so Mick was able to work with some of our other team to set up an eye gaze system for him to be able to communicate how he was feeling, what he needed. And Rob is still using the eye gaze system to this day, but more for a communication in general conversation, and he uses it for his work now. So it's something that can continue further, but that project is specifically about acute situations. We also now have a lot of other projects. iMine and iGaze Games sort of took that a step further, and whilst iGaze is great for communication, there weren't many games that were out there that would solely be able to use iGaze for the whole game. So iMine, our technicians created an interface to help us, to help people who can access iGaze use buttons on screen instead by just looking at that particular area, and then being able to play Minecraft, the whole game of Minecraft, just with their eyes. And iGaze Games has a list of sort of a range of games from chess to sort of 4 in a row, sort of different age levels and abilities, but it just gives a nicer range of game options for people. Bubble Busters is a very new project that works with people who, similar to how with COVID, we were all sort of self-isolating. It works with people who are self-isolating, children who are self-isolating in particular, due to cancer and other conditions where they're stuck in that bubble. They can't really leave the house at the moment. So we are able to arrange for little robots to go to school in their stead, and they can access it via a tablet. So they can still be part of the social side of school and take part as much as they feel they can. And then the two below kind of follow into why we're kind of here today, really. So game access info and the dev kit are two resources that we've developed over the years to help disseminate our knowledge and expertise on a wider scale, because we're a small charity based in Oxford, and we can't really go out to the entire world. So it's a great way to get our knowledge out there. So we create video series, we create little posts detailing interesting things that we found within games for accessibility features. We also update it with any latest research that our R&D team have done. And it even includes some case studies as well. So people who aren't sure what a particular bit of equipment could do to help them, they can see, oh, this person uses it in this particular way. Maybe that would be good for me. And they can potentially either do it themselves or they can get in touch and we can talk them through it. And our dev kit is aimed at developers. It's basically taking all of our knowledge from the great accessibility features that we found in games and just suggesting other options to add in a few special features that would just make a game even more accessible. It covers 7 general areas and includes little videos, so it's not a long slog of watching or reading text. It's lots of little videos. You can pick and choose what might be useful for your particular game. And the Lone Library project. So this is an example of an assessment that was carried out at our games room. You can see there's lots of wires and boxes and things because during our assessments, we're generally trying to find the best option for someone. So in this case, it's a chin joystick that's mounted on a table and connected to the standard controller. So using a thumb extension, we can just mount that controller under the chin, and he's able to then move it left and right, up and down to be able to access the steering for a racing game. So we work with anyone who has difficulty with the physical access to gaming and computer technology. So we are a very small team of, there's really only 4 full-time members of staff in the Lone Library side of things. A few people help out every now and then from the Stargaze team, but as a result, we're only really able to deal with physical access because we just don't have capacity for that extra amount of inquiries, I'm afraid. But we will help with all ages. The youngest we've worked with, youngest I've worked with was about 1.5, and the oldest was 96. So a big age range because gaming is for everyone. Why not give gaming a go whenever you fancy, really, at whatever age. So we tend to work with a range of different conditions like neurological conditions like muscular dystrophy. We work with spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injuries. It's a real range, and we've not really found a condition that we can't find something that we can help with. There are just limits to the technology that we can do. It might not be to the level that someone's hoping for. So managing expectations is a part of the job, but we do our best. And anyone in theory can get in touch. We ideally prefer if it's from themselves or close family and friends, just because you know the person, you know what games they'll like, and it's a bit easier to get in contact than via a doctor or a therapist who might take a while to get back to us. And then we'll just do some emails, set up some video calls, arrange to loan out equipment, and then do follow-ups as needed for as long as needed, really. And our assessments and the loan service is free, so that's pretty nice. So the consoles and games, you'll probably all be very familiar with these. We can get pretty much most things working on pretty much all these consoles, or platforms, I should say. And of course, because there's a range of games, you've got some games like these two, which are very straightforward single switch access. But we also help out for far more complicated games like good old Red Dead Redemption. So we always look into the accessibility of games. If someone comes up with a game that they really want to play that we've never heard of, we'll look into it, we'll figure out what they need to access, and then we'll come up with the best options using what movements they have. So the two sort of key Switch interfaces that we use at the moment are the Xbox Adaptive Controller and the HoriFlex controller. The XAC, it's easier to say than adaptive controller all the time, is a device designed by Microsoft. And we were actually able to be part of contributing to sort of the design process behind it, which was a really, really exciting experience for us. And it's a great little device because you can plug in joysticks and switches, and then we can position them exactly to make the most of someone's movement. And the HoriFlex controller is a Nintendo official controller version. It does reduce the need for using adapters when we're using the Nintendo Switch then. And then the switches. We've got a range of switches. Logitech have brought out the adaptive gaming kit, but we also have smaller switches for very minute movements, and much larger switches all the way up to sort of palm and hand size that can just be velcroed and positioned exactly where someone needs. And similar for joysticks as well. We've got tiny little joysticks, like the feather joystick by Celtic Magic, where you literally just need some paper or feather to just nudge that joystick, and it will just register on the screen, and you can adjust the sensitivity all the way up to things like the zigzag or the ultra stick, where it uses much larger, more gross movements. So we tailor it to exactly what the person is able to do, and we'll position it to make the most of that. And then Copilot is an option that allows us to use two different controllers at the same time. Xbox have it sort of inbuilt, but we can actually use adapters to replicate that. Sometimes people find it easier to have two controllers separate from each other rather than just one in the middle of the lap. So that just gives us a few other options. And it also means that if someone can access certain buttons, but they can't quite always reach something else, they can play with a friend or family member, and they can both play as player one together. And now for the voice part. I bet you were probably wondering where the voice part came into this, really. So voice control is one of the options that we can use in conjunction with a lot of the physical access we've just talked about. On a really small scale, you can use something like a shout box, which you can plug into the adaptive controller. And then you can make a noise. It doesn't have to be a particular word, it can just be a noise, and that will then activate a switch. You can then combine that with a latching box. So you make a noise, the switch is pressed, you make another noise, a switch releases, as it were. So that can be really great for someone making a noise, the switch presses and the character walks forward, and then they make the other noise, it's released and the character stops. And then on a much larger scale, we have voice scripts that we can write for more complicated game access. And that uses an adapter called the Titan 2, which is coincidentally the same adapter that we use for Copilot. We can also use this adapter to get any controller working on pretty much any console. So it's a pretty nifty little device that we found quite useful over the years. So on to the case study. So this is Helen. Helen got in touch because she was finding that she had nerve pain on her right hand and her left to an extent, and it was affecting her being able to use the mouse and keyboard continuously for gameplay. So we started off sort of figuring out exactly what she needed. The focus was all on, whilst we could not necessarily completely remove the pain from gaming, because nerve pain is quite a difficult one, we were able to work out what movements were most comfortable and what would trigger more pain. And for Helen, she found that she could move the mouse to an extent and click, but doing big movements across the whole screen tired her out and caused quite a bit more pain. So the game she wanted to play was RuneScape. There's actually two versions of RuneScape, the old school RuneScape and RS3. And she liked to play both. So we were basically tasked with trying to find a voice script that either worked with both or make one for each. It's a point and click game, and it's your classic sort of questing, crafting, fighting monsters kind of a game. But as you can see from the pictures, the interface is slightly different. So we opted for doing two different voice scripts. So we looked into the accessibility of the accessibility features in the game itself first, because it would be nice if there were options to help before we start doing the voice script. So we were able to remap some of the most important functions that she wanted to the taskbar at the bottom. And then we were able to use voice attack, which is one of the voice control softwares that we use, to create a script that would, in essence, click those keys for her and move the mouse to the particular positions as and when she wanted. So for example, she spoke Zoom and it would move to the position where it would click Zoom for her. This is a slightly better example of how voice attack works. It's a nice intuitive one, which is why we used it. So in the future, Helen can access it herself and make little tweaks herself. So you can choose whatever word you want it to pick up. And in this case, for RuneScape, we generally set things for a particular position on the screen. And then we team view it into her computer to be able to set this up to exactly the positioning on her screen. So we did start off with about 25 commands, and then slowly but surely we're tweaking them down a bit to the ones that she finds the most useful. And we've already done a few review sessions of her setup, and we'll just continue to do that for as long as she wants and as long as she needs. It's just something every now and then she'll find that she actually wants this particular button for a particular quest that she's finding difficult. So we'll just team view her in, we'll discuss exactly where she'd find it useful, and we just edit things as and when she needs. So at the moment, it's just a few tweaks, and she's happily just taking part in combat, which is something she was never really able to do before because it was just a bit too quick for her. And then in the future, we're just keeping improving what her script is. And then if it progresses, we have other options for mice that we've discussed about trying out. And it's a bit of a trial and error thing until she finds what will feel comfortable for her. So that was quite a bit of talking. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm more than happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Nomi. It's Ben here, obviously, on my laptop. But I'll try and relay any questions from the audience. Is there anything anyone would like to know, further information about? Something I was curious about was bigger picture for SpecialEffect. Do you think you will be working with voice technology going forwards and helping others? And are you actively working on anything else at the moment?
So we're definitely working on voice control and adding into the sort of toolkit that we have of different voice control softwares that we're using and becoming more comfortable with. It's definitely one of those things where we've got quite a lot of people who do use voice control alongside the standard controls. It's not something we necessarily suggest voice for everything yet for everyone, just because sometimes there is a bit of a lag. But that being said, I do have at least 2 people on my caseload who just game with voice. So it is a thing that does work well for people. And it reduces the pain for people whilst they're playing, which is great.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I've got a question from the audience. Isaac?
Hello. I was just wondering if any of your voice attack profiles were publicly available.
Did you hear that, Nomi?
I didn't quite catch that.
Are any of your voice attack profiles publicly available?
So on our Game Access website, the standard voice attack profiles we use are available on there. And then we also have some tutorials on how to create and edit those for your particular game of choice.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you, Nomi, for joining us remotely. It was really great to have you and really appreciate that insight. Just ask the audience to give a hand for Nomi.
Oh, thank you for having me.